I think we're going to get started. You guys may have noticed Evie Witten was the first one on the list, and she is unable to join us. So I'm going to start us off and give us a high-level overview of the industry, and then help moderate the rest of the session. So my name is Missy Good. I'm the mariculture specialist with Alaska Sea Grant. For those of you that don't know, Alaska Sea Grant is part of a national sea grant network. There are 34 sea grant programs across the nation. You can see the little tiny dots in that map on the top. So we're across the Atlantic coast, the Pacific coast, and the Great Lakes. And our mission is to enhance the use of our marine resources. So you may have learned of land grant programs, the cooperative extension programs there. We are its counterpart in the ocean. And I'll go back just one step. So each of these city town locations is where we currently have faculty and staff. We are hiring someone in Bethel right now, and we've had folks in other places like Unalaska, Ketchikan. And yeah, it kind of changes around a little bit. Right now, our mariculture team consists of our director, Jeannie Eckert, myself, Aaron Jones, he's sitting over here, James Crimp, Jessica Whitney, and Rachel French. You can see the titles of each of those. And collectively, we are the Alaska Mariculture Research and Training Center. This is not a brick and mortar center, more of a coordinating entity that is a sister entity of the Alaska Mariculture Alliance, which you're going to hear about next. I'm also the Kodiak Seafood and Marine Science Center coordinator, where we have an awesome staff there. We have Quentin Fong, Chris Sanito, Mark Solano, Ashley Dunker, and that kind of includes most of our seafood workforce development folks. So state of the industry, let's just get us started right now. So we really specifically say mariculture, and mariculture is a type of aquaculture. It's the cultivation of marine organisms in a marine environment, and that environment can be in the ocean or it could be land-based as well. We specifically talk about shellfish and seaweeds in Alaska, as finfish farming is illegal. You could see there is some initiatives to change that, but we are really specifically working on shellfish and seaweeds. Currently in the state of Alaska, the most marine species that are being cultivated are Pacific oysters and kelp, primarily sugar, ribbon, and bull kelp. But there is a lot of interest in other species. There's been experimental work. There's been research that's gone into pinto abalone, sea cucumber, sea urchins, various kelp species, and red and green seaweeds. Scallops, there is gooey duck farming going on currently. Interest in razor clams, especially the restoration of razor clams. I don't know if you are familiar with the Cook Inlet and the razor clam populations on the east side of the Cook Inlet, which have been suppressed for a good number of years now, but then other clam species as well, especially when it comes to restoration efforts. Currently, there are 99 permitted hatcheries / nurseries and aquatic farms across Alaska. This map here comes from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game and is updated about a couple weeks ago when I first put this together, but each of those green and black dots shows where these sites are. This includes 1,374 acres of leased space that can be utilized for cultivation. This doesn't necessarily mean this is the amount of space that is being utilized currently. Many farm operations only use a small footprint of their leased farm area. Also, that leased farm area has to include everything, anchors, lines. And so you could think your farm is likely anchored to the seafloor than going up in a smaller surface footprint. And it's spread out between Southeast Alaska, South Central, and Kodiak region. There has been some farm sites permitted in Southwestern Alaska, and there's certainly interest in doing cultivation in that region. These are a couple of graphs from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. You could see years on the x-axis and the number of oysters sold on the left asterisk. So this is numbers, not pounds. You can see that we had, there's been oyster cultivation going on in the state of Alaska for quite a few years now. but we really started seeing management of it here in the early 1990s. We could see some peaks in 2016. 2020 was, COVID times was kind of devastating for the oyster industry. Oysters are primarily sold into restaurants. So without restaurants being opening, we did see a dip, but we could see that in the graph for the last few years, those numbers are starting to come up again. There's a difference between the orange and the blue here. So the blue is numbers of oysters that are sold to the public or to distributors, where the orange is to other farms. So certain farms are set up to hold those really small oysters. They grow them out to a size that they can then go out into their grow out systems. And I've got a few pictures coming out. So we started off at the hatchery with our oyster cultivation. All of the seed oysters, little baby oysters in Alaska, are currently coming from out of state, mostly Hawaii. So they get sent up from Hawaii, where they're in a nursery system such, oops, a little different. So to see, you can see little upwellers over there with those little tiny oysters in it. There we go, right here. And then algae, they eat a ton of algae. So you have to have these really large systems for growing algae for feeding those baby oysters. Then they'll send to a grow out system like this. This one's called a FLUPSI, a floating upweller system. And so that small seed is grown out in there. And then once they get big enough, they can go out to either hanging rack systems. So these docks, there's racks that are actually hanging in the water underneath there, or these floating systems. This is an oyster grow system. And this is a flip farm system where you can run along and flip them over. Oysters, like I said, are primarily sold as a consumable, so direct sales or to restaurants and distributors. And they're primarily sold live. We're going to jump into seaweeds right now. So this is the amount of seaweed that's being sold years on the x-axis, poundage now on the y-axis. The first seaweed farm went in here in Kodiak in 2016. The first harvest was 2017. We can see there's a big spike in 2022, and it has come down a little bit since then as the industry is figuring out markets. This is primarily kelp that's been cultivated, but there are some sales of other seaweeds, including reds and greens, that are naturally set on cultivation gear. And kelp farming looks different at most farm sites, but again, it starts off in a hatchery system. Up here, we could see seed spools. So these are PVC spools with little tiny string on them, and that black fuzz is the little tiny kelp that is being grown in that hatchery setting. Sorry, these buttons are kind of weird. And then we have some outplanting right here. So you can see that little dark space right there. That's one of these seed spools, and it's getting outplanted onto some grow lines. So here's a spreader bar system. And so each of these lines, that darkness, that's all kelp that's being grown on there. And outplanting occurs in the fall, winter months, and then is harvested in the spring. And there's a ton of interest in kelps and other seaweeds across the world. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It was estimated at $17 billion in 2023, with expectations to grow. In Alaska right now, we're primarily been growing for food. And food products can be salsas, hot sauces, sprinkles, and nori sheets. If you've been to a sushi restaurant, you've eaten seaweed. But the real interest is in other products, biostimulants, so things you can put into your garden to help your plants grow, as a fertilizer additive, essentially. Cosmetics, nutraceuticals, there's a lot of products that can be made with seaweeds. You all are using seaweed components every single day. It's in your shampoo, it's in your toothpaste, it's in your ice cream. It's helping things hold together. But how are we going to grow? And so really what I'm here to talk about is workforce development. And we have a couple of initiatives that are in place to help us grow the industry, but how do we do that sustainably? The Mariculture Research and Restoration Consortium is a project funded by the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council. You could see it has various agencies, industry, and academia that are part of this project, but this project is really looking at what are the impacts of aquatic farms in its local environment, all the way from the microscopic to the marine mammals and everything in between. And what we are learning from here is going to help us move into the future on how do we grow the industry and making sure we're doing justice to the environment. We're doing a good job as we do it. Another project, the Alaska Mariculture Cluster. See a large, sweet logo soup here of agencies and organizations that are part of this. And this is funded at $49 million through the FDA Build Back Better program to help us grow the industry. This includes research, workforce development, equipment purchases, and other things as well. We could go into that later. In addition to that, the state of Alaska funded the universities at $5 million to help grow workforce development programs at each of our universities. And as part of that, we developed the Alaska Workforce Development Plan. This workforce development plan includes occupations, nursery hatchery operators, farmers, marketing specialists, processors, and product development specialists on what kind of training is needed from entry level all the way to professional, and also lists out resources that are currently available within the state. So it's a guidance document, and this was recently published in 2023. So we're trying to work through this guidance document to fill the spaces that are there, and there's quite a few of them, since this is such a nascent industry. This includes University of Alaska Anchorage, University of Alaska Fairbanks, which is where Alaska Sea Grant is hosted, and the University of Alaska Southeast. And I also wanted to point out Green Wave as well. This is a nonprofit. You'll hear from Lindsay here in a little bit, but they do a lot of workforce development training as well in regards to kelp cultivation. And I mentioned the Alaska Mariculture Research and Training Center. I have a QR code here. If you want to follow the industry, what's going on, I highly recommend signing up for our listserv. But we also have fantastic social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to keep people abreast of what training opportunities are coming up, research, funding opportunities, and just events. And we do updates on research projects as well. Alaska Sea Grant is really kind of the foundational organization for workforce development. We offer short courses. We're part of the university, but we're not generally offering 4-credit courses. And we've been hosting a lot of different things. We knowledge exchange opportunities. The Alaska Mariculture Conference of Alaska is a group of us that put this on together, but it's been highly successful and it has grown each year, and is probably the best way to learn about what's going on in the industry. Other knowledge exchange opportunities, workshops. Here's a list of some of the workshops from the previous year. Due to the short time, I'm not going to read those, but feel free to. Publications, our most recent one is we've updated the field guides to the seaweeds of Alaska. And then we have other grant and fellowship opportunities. And things that are coming up, we just finished our harmful algal bloom workshop in Kodiak. We have oyster hatchery nursery training coming up in Ketchikan, a kelp farm operations coming up here in Kodiak, and a seaweed handling and processing workshop here in Kodiak as well. These are all short courses. Anyone can sign up for them. They're not a 4-credit course. But then we start moving up to University of Alaska Anchorage and the Prince William Sound Prince William Sound College, and they have an occupational endorsement. This is a maritime endorsement, so it's a several credited courses. It only takes up a semester. It includes a small portion of mariculture in it. But this is if you're going for those accredited programs. And then UAS in the Sitka College, they've developed Alaska Aquaculture Lab. This is a 3-day intensive accredited course, but also Alaska Aquaculture Semester, which is mariculture and salmon hatcheries together. But that is a fall semester. These are great opportunities for folks that are furthering on and wanting to become a biologist, being a manager. It will help with being a farmer as well, but these are more academically focused. And we've been working on developing other resources as well as needed. If you are interested in becoming a nursery operator, hatchery operator, farmer, there's a suite of permitting you have to go through, and we developed a website, and it steps you through getting started, finding the right site, applying for your permits and leases, and then moving on and doing other things if you want to transfer it. This is a good spot as well. We are currently updating that with NOAA partners, so it's kind of stalled a little bit. And then we have the Alaska Mariculture map, and this mapping program was developed to help potential farmers make the maps that are required for the permit and lease application. I'm gonna leave it here. There's my email address at the top, Aaron's as well, and then James Crimp, he's our shellfish mariculture specialist in Juneau. There's our websites, and yeah, thank you. I'm at time right now. Okay. Okay. Questions? No? You guys are excited for the next presentation? Sure. Yeah, sure. So the question was asking about the manufacturing of products, and he's developing a vegan burger that has seaweed in it or kelp in it. Kelps are the large brown leafy seaweeds. So seaweed's kind of all encompassing. All kelps are seaweeds, not all seaweeds are kelp. And so for as far as support goes, so here at the Kodiak Seafood and Marine Science Center, we're the designated processing authority for the state of Alaska. So we can do that shelf stability testing. And Kristen Nito, who's our seafood technology specialist, and we have a food safety volunteer, can help step people that are interested in developing products through ingredients and then processes that make a shelf stable product, and help them follow through the regulations. I don't know if Sarah's still in the room, but she can, oh, there she is. Yeah, and so she can help with the regulatory side, where we can actually help with the food side. And, we have a water activity meter, pH, kind of that whole suite of things. We're pretty excited. We're currently hiring a food product development specialist. So get the word out there. And they're really going to be able to step up the services that we can offer. And fingers crossed, a food safety person as well. Those are in person. Yep. Oh, yep. So she's asking about the college accredited courses that are offered through the Prince William Sound College. So those and the ones that are being offered through the UAS Sitka College are in person. So you do have to be present in those communities. I know the Sitka campus has quite a bit of housing available, but most of those that they're offering are semester long. So they're like 3 months long. But you come out of there with quite a few credits. Our workshops are mostly in person, but we do offer some online ones. We have a kelp farm business course that we'll be hosting here this next month. And then we do a lot of like the sanitation classes, HACCP classes, better processing controls, and those are largely online. All right, so let's switch gears for our next speaker. Next, we're going to hear from Jason Lessard. He's the executive director with the Alaska Mariculture Alliance. Jason.
Thanks, Missy. All right, just figuring out my controls here. Yes, my name is Jason Lessard. I'm the executive director of the Alaska Mariculture Alliance, as Missy had just stated. Here's our mission, founded to develop and support a robust and sustainable mariculture industry for the long-term benefit of Alaska's economy, environment, and communities. First, what is mariculture? Missy did touch on this a little bit, but a lot of folks new to the term. The term was specifically chosen here in Alaska to differentiate itself from aquaculture, which does include finfish farming and freshwater farming and stuff. And I threw that in red, that finfish farming is illegal here in Alaska. Despite the recent bill that had come out, a lot of folks assume that might fall under the umbrella of mariculture, but that is not the industry that we've been developing here. It is really shellfish and seaweeds that we're growing in our oceans. So there's been a lot of support statewide for this industry. In 2016, under Governor Walker, a task force was put together made up of 11 members of a pretty diverse cross-section of the industry, farmers, researchers, so on and so forth. They did, in 2021, when they sunset, put together this fantastic report to the governor. Much of the information in there we're still working through and on. It was really robust and really laid out some groundwork for helping us in the state to develop our industry. Within that report, was a recommendation to start the two organizations, my organization, Alaska Mariculture Alliance, and you just heard a little bit about the Alaska Mariculture Resource and Training Center from Missy. I put our missions up there, but we heard mostly about them, so I'll just skip through this slide here. Our membership, and specifically our voting membership, because that's who is determining the direction of our organization, it's made up by people that are actively engaged in the industry. In order to become a voting member, you have to have a direct tie to this industry. So it's as the industry group and wanting to be the voice of the industry, it's really important that we're made up of folks in that industry. We, again, really big cross section from the industry. It's not just farmers, processors, researchers, anybody directly tied in advancing mariculture here in the state can become a voting member. We also have the ability for supporting members that are people that are just interested in helping us out, interested in the industry in general. And what we value about all this is the local perspective and expertise that we get through having a membership that is directly tied to the industry. Benefits to the state of an Alaska mariculture industry, economy. I mean, that's a really big one, specifically in coastal economies right now, is a way of diversifying opportunities, using our oceans in separate ways, bringing in people that have been working on the water, as primarily in the fishing industry, to do different work with the knowledge and skill sets and tools that they already have. One of the things that really brought me to this industry is food security and food sovereignty. You've heard time and time again, and probably even prior to this, about the percentage of food that comes into our state from out of state and how very little we grow in state. And this is a way to help with that. We can, produce healthy proteins and vegetables with really minimal inputs. There's no fertilizers required. There's no fresh water. All the nutrients are just being pulled from the ocean that these products are being grown in. And we're really eager to grow a symbiotic relationship with our terrestrial agriculture here. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, through the creation of biostimulants and animal feeds and the benefits that can have to our larger food systems. Also, another really important part of this is the environment. As I mentioned, there's zero inputs. To create such healthy food in such a minimally impactful way is strategically, for growing a food system, going to be really important. So we see a lot of value in this. There's also the halo effect on the local systems where it's grown. Oysters are filters. They filter 50 gallons of water a day. And seaweed as well is picking up things out of the water. And so you're getting this halo effect of improved water quality around the farms. We're seeing on the farms lots of signs of life, crustaceans and fish, and it's providing cover for them and food and so on and so forth. And so we're seeing marine ecosystem regeneration throughout all of this. And another impact of environment, not a direct result of the farming, but from the products, utilizing in many ways, mostly seaweed, but in green technologies, plastics alternatives, alternatives to agrochemical fertilizers, and so on and so forth. So really excited about the environmental benefits of this industry. A little bit about the support we've had, because it will give you an understanding of the direction that we're moving the industry. The state, again, has been really supportive. They gave us a $5 million matching grant program to help the industry grow. It's a dollar-to-dollar match, so it's not just grant funds handed out. It's pairing state funds with private investment to help better this industry, mostly into either getting new entities started in the industry or farming upgrades and efficiencies for folks that are already in it. We are currently in our second award round of 1.5 million. We have one more to go. The first one, we're getting close. We're maybe about 2/3 of the way through, and we're already starting to see the benefits on farms of these improvements. I had one farmer that got a new system that said a month-long project has taken him now to just like a couple of days from just this investment. So, those efficiencies are really going to help this industry go as well. And so thankful to the state, to the governor who put this forward, to the legislature that supported this funding. There's also the Build Back Better Regional Challenge Grant, which was awarded to Southeast Conference. Missy talked about this a little bit in her presentation. $49 million from the federal government to help prop this industry up in here in Alaska. Through that was the creation of the Alaska Mariculture Cluster. Looks like my picture kind of covered up. I got a little formatting got out of the way here, but it's the cluster is made up again of people in the industry. AMA has 4 seats on this board, so that from our perspective, the people that are involved in the industry as AMA are bringing their knowledge and perspective to this cluster that is guiding this funding. There's also Alaska Native entities, and so on and so forth, and the regional economic development organizations from those 4 regions where mariculture is happening are involved. So kind of an all hands on deck for folks that have an interest in this to help guide this funding and make sure that it's used in the best way, both for the direct benefit of where that funding may be going in the efforts, but also to make sure that we're meeting equity measures that were in all of this to begin with, baked into this grant. Within that grant, it was divided into 7 project components. Much of it was outlined in the report to the governor. And being a new industry, we're trying to create a full new industry up here. And so you're lifting it up from every point, not just trying to figure out, I'm a new business in an industry and where do I fit into it? But that means we need to be working on workforce development, R&D, market development, right? All of these things, every one of these components, we can't just get everybody farming without a market to take it to, or without the knowledge of how to best process it, which gets back to the market, right? We don't want to invest in a bunch of equipment to process a product that nobody's really looking to buy. And so as we're doing this, it's really trying to uplift on all these fronts, and this funding is really helping with that. Within that funding, my organization manages the liaison program. And in this program, we've contracted with 5 regional Alaska Native organizations to have folks that are boots on the ground doing outreach, not just talking about the benefits of the industry and the opportunities in the grant, but acting as a conduit for feedback from those communities to understand what they would like to see from mariculture, right? Maybe, we have some communities that are interested to see what might happen with seaweed farming, but right now in clam gardens, right? And so understanding who wants what, really just offering up the opportunities and the help and the guidance to make it so in their communities if they'd like to see that way. And we have one of our liaisons in the room here today, Lexa Meyer, through Cali. It does a lot of work here on Kodiak, a lot of great work. One other thing I would say before we move on from the Build Back Better Regional Challenge Grant, there is a really fantastic platform that the funding helped to develop. They partnered with this organization called Hatch, which has been doing work on the seaweed front primarily on a global scale, but for them to put together this insights website on what's going on in Alaska. If you want a sort of a quick and dirty intro, this is a really great way to get it. And it's more than that. It's pretty robust. You can find out a lot of great information. There's great images and so on and so forth. It's a really great tool, and I suggest checking it out. Now, to talk about some of the things that I'm excited about with this program is the potential relationship with our terrestrial farmers here in the state. And I thought I would touch on this because of the theme of this conference of collaboration to grow our food systems. The Build Back Better grant, again, has funded some of these projects. Right here are 3 of awardees from a recent project on this agricultural front. So this is kelp from Alaska. The work isn't always happening here in state. So this first one, Pacific Kelp Company, is an organization in Southeast. They're working with some golf courses and vineyards in the lower 48 to see the benefits of biostimulant. Not a real apples to apples on how biostim might work in our farms here on our carrots and potatoes, but really important work to understand the benefits of this, right? So what are the benefits to soil? What are the benefits to the plant resiliency, and so on and so forth? Green Wave it has one scaling bulk kelp for biostimulant production. We have Lindsay here in the audience who's presenting. I don't know if she's touching on it in her presentation, but they also did just announce Green Wave that they have partnered with Rodale Institute on the East Coast for a multi-year project to see, to do some research into the benefits of biostimulants in Connecticut, Rhode Island area, I believe. And then a bit more close to us here in Kodiak, the CRRC and the folks at the Eluctic Pride Institute are working on liquid biostimulants to see there. So these projects were just awarded. The work is largely yet to begin. I don't have any data or anything to share on this, but this is some of the research and some of the funding through the Build Back Better going to help advance the industry. And we're really excited to see what happens here. In addition, so here are some of the benefits of seaweed as a biostimulant. Phytostimulatory properties, increasing the plant growth, phytoelicitor, and I will fully admit these are new terms to me researching these projects, but the phytoelicitor activity, it helps in resiliency of the plants. We see positive changes to the soil microbiome when you're using kelp in that. And again, I mentioned earlier, the alternative to agrochemicals, getting away from chemical-based fertilizers and using more natural and nature-based fertilizers. And for those of you interested in organic farming, this is what we're working towards. Seaweed also has potential as a great livestock feed. As I mentioned, it's highly nutritious. Gram for gram, seaweed packs a greater variety and abundance of minerals than most other food. This is like the top 10 of important minerals found in kelp, but there's somewhere like 84 or something like that. It's wild how much kelp can uptake from its surroundings. And this one as well, the bottom point. Sea vegetables are often 10 to 100 times higher in mineral content than that of terrestrial plants. So when you're talking about utilizing this as a supplement in livestock feed, that 1 gram of seaweed is going to have a lot of mineral compared to just feed or whatever is being utilized. And additionally, seaweed and kelps, the ability for a body to absorb is far more efficient than other supplements, mineral supplements that you can feed to livestock. So it's really, really efficient for farmers as well. I was really, really conservative on this number. There's studies that show that seaweed supplements have reduced methane emissions 82%, but there's some of these trials are smaller numbers and so on and so forth. And so I wanted to be a bit conservative. There's still a lot of work going on in this, but definitely see that as a benefit in dairy cattle. Locally, there was a farmer from Kodiak that had sent a fair amount of sugar kelp to a pig farm in the Midwest. They supplemented 1% of their feed and saw a net yield on a per sow basis of over $260. I will say that did not calculate the benefits of reduced antibiotic needs. They did see that they didn't need as much, but that wasn't calculated into this final number. So we're still figuring out what are these potential benefits. It helps cultivate a healthy gut microbiome in us as well, so we should all be eating seaweed. And it's a powerful tool for sustainability. I did get the signal I'm short on time, so I'm just going to wrap it up there. Here's my contact information. Again, thank you so much.
We can do a couple questions. Yeah.
Hello. For the amendments for organic gardening, I've used like water soluble kelp quite often. Is that different than the kelp extract, or is that the same thing? Just curious.
That I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I would imagine it was the same thing, the liquid biostim, but
Okay.
I can't say for certain, sorry.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, I'm not an expert in this. I'm working on one of the projects with Evie Witten and those folks through that CRRC grant. So there's acid extract, there's fermentation extract. There's a couple different ways to make a water-based kelp product. And then there's also like hydrolyzation, which is like, it gets like, yeah, finally. Yeah, but then it's water soluble. So there's a few different techniques, and I think all of these projects that are just funded are looking at. There's some differences in the techniques they're looking at for extraction, but the idea is that you could like fertigate with it, use it for a dunk, use it as a foliar spray or a like soil application. Yeah.
Thanks you for rescuing me on that question.
That was a great answer. All right.
Yeah, the question is, with all of the uses, how much of the market would that take up versus that of food? You know, talking about biostimulants, when you're talking about plastics alternatives, you're talking about the need for a lot of biomass. So that would take up quite a bit of farming space. I think right now we're just eager to see how many potential uses out there and what markets there are. I don't want to speak for farmers, but I would think from a farmer perspective, food is going to be a really important one. Probably even just basically from a financial perspective, there's a better market on the food market when you're trying to sell into that than versus plastics alternatives or something like that. And again, the plastics alternative is so new, we're not even really sure what the price point would be out of here or something like that. But so nascent up here, still trying to figure out what markets there are, and also understanding that because of the nascency, I think we just need to open ourselves to all potential markets so that our farmers can grow. And then we can't explore markets if we're not growing, and we can't grow if our farmers aren't getting paid. So a biostim market right now gives them an outlet in somewhere to sell while we're looking at what other potential uses are there. So hope that answered your question.
All right. Next up, we have Lindsay Olsen with Greenwave. Talk to us about kelp as food.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Lindsay Olsen. I work for a national nonprofit called Greenwave that supports seaweed and other types of ocean farmers. I'm also based in Homer, and I have a small kelp farm in Catchment Bay that's applying Evie's CRRC project. So I wear multiple hats. And today I'm putting on a new and different. I usually talk about seaweed farming and in sort of how the industry is impacting farmers, but half of Greenwave is dedicated to thinking about what happens to kelp after it comes out of the water. And I have two teammates, Sam and Grace, who are on our market development team and are really trying to engage with the latter half of the value chain. And so today I'm presenting on behalf of my colleague Sam, thinking about food as a next generation food ingredient. And just to follow up on Jason's great overview of the industry, we definitely see there being myriad uses for farmed kelp coming out of the US and Canada and Alaska specifically. But food is one that is accessible to farmers right now. It helps build sort of story and image and awareness of kelp, and often has the highest margin for farmers. So it's just like part of the portfolio of potential markets, but because we are at a food conference today, I'm gonna be talking about kelp as a food ingredient. So Missy and Jason both talked about the virtues of kelp. I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think probably many of us have heard the sustainability story behind farm seaweed. It requires no fresh water, no fertilizer, no arable land to grow, and while it's existing in the water, it can take up excess nutrients in places like Long Island Sound, where there is nutrient runoff from agricultural fields. This isn't so much of a concern in Alaskan waters, but it really does matter in other places around the country. Improves biodiversity and provides habitat for juvenile fish, and absorbs nitrogen and carbon dioxide as it's doing it. So all of these things gave seaweed a splash. I think we've probably all seen the headlines over the last decade. Seaweed's going to save the world. It's going to be this next climate-friendly ingredient, and everyone from Kim Kardashian to Whole Foods is talking about how seaweed is the next big thing. But when you kind of get down into the specifics of it, how you use seaweed and the ways in which it shows up in your final product, specifically in your final food product, really influence the type of volumes, the price point, and even sort of like the structure and the nature of the supply chain in getting it to market. So how is kelp currently used in food products? I think we're probably all aware of some of the kelp-centric brands, those hero ingredient brands like Barnacle Foods, Atlantic Sea Farms. The East Coast has a kelp burger. They sell kelp kimchi. Down in Ketchikan, there's Foraged and Found with their pickles and pesto. Marco Scheer and recently partnered to make a holdfast vodka that I think is like 30% seaweed. And these companies are really crucial to the growth of the industry because they're out there telling the story, talking about the virtues of kelp, getting everyone excited about it. But in terms of market share, it's actually quite small and easily saturated how many seaweed-centric brands the industry can support. But as we kind of like move our way right on the scale, you open up these kind of new opportunities that can potentially move a lot more volume. So the next one is sort of a food company that thinks of kelp as a sneaky side. I asked Sam as we were talking about this, I was like, are these official terms? She was like, no, I just made those up. So these are Sam Garwin terms. But if you think about kelp as sort of secondary ingredient, here you've got companies that are selling a product that already has like quite good market traction and customer base, and they are incorporating kelp into like a limited release or some sort of version of their product to either tell the story, to increase nutrition, to solve some sort of problem, to back up their claims of being locally sourced, et cetera, et cetera. And all these brands up here have partnered with local kelp farmers. Copper River Brewing did a release of a kelp beer. I know the Kodiak Brewery, I think BB has one on tap right now. Taco Loco put out a kelp tortilla, and then Chugach Chocolate does a kelp chocolate. And then on the far right side of the scale are the stealth ninjas. Oh, okay. And this is where these are much bigger companies that are using kelp, but they're not talking about it. So the kelp that is incorporated into these products is solving a function. It's maybe an emulsifier, a texturizer. It's adding nutrients. It's helping them back up their corporate social responsibility goals of meeting particular climate targets. But you won't find it on the label except in sort of like an extracted format that many of us wouldn't understand, and they often won't mention that it's in the product. So thinking about the sort of differences across these different types of food markets and the opportunity that they provide to Alaskan farmers and the Alaskan industry as a whole, that hero ingredient, again, the Barnacle Foods of the world are so important. They create relationships direct to farmer and to buyer. And they have, quite a bit of kelp in those products, up to 20% or 20% or more inclusion, but the market size is pretty small. And so where GreenWave has really been sort of focusing our energy recently is trying to recruit companies and brands in these latter two categories to really think about incorporating seaweed, because we see that as a way to really be able to move quite a bit more volume and think about growing the industry as a whole. And so the two ways that we've sort of been doing that with this sneaky kick, we are currently recruiting for a new program called CoLab. And the gentleman in the back asked what programs are available for people who are interested in manufacturing with kelp. So we're launching a new program this fall. We're recruiting a number of CPG food companies that already have existing traction in the marketplace. These are like broth companies, snack companies, things they already sell a food product that does not include kelp. And we are inviting them in and helping to cover, sort of to teach them about kelp and its virtues, but then also cover all of the R&D costs at looking at incorporating kelp into those products to solve a problem for the brand. And we've got an advisor from the Stealth Ninja category, a large multinational company that is interested in potentially acquiring some of these brands if they were to solve a much bigger problem for that multinational. So some of the problems that the multinationals are interested in solving are sodium reduction. Kelp is like a great sodium replacement. It's low sodium, but provides a lot of flavor. Also the texturizer, emulsifier, and nutrient booster. So we see sort of like as we move across the spectrum, there would be less and less inclusion of kelp in those ultimate end products, but a bigger and bigger market that would be a couple steps removed from the farmers. So yeah, to get back to sort of like why would someone want to include kelp and like why would you put it in your product if you weren't talking about the story? Jason gave a great overview of all of the health benefits of kelp. It really is a pretty amazing substance, but it also provides lots of stabilizers, textures, emulsifiers, binders, lots of components that sort of like come from the gooey factor of kelp. It's been found to increase shelf life with antimicrobials in the tissue. Like I mentioned, the low sodium flavor enhancer, lots of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, improves gut health, and then all of those really impressive mineral nutrients and vitamins that it can add to nutrition. But we're also finding that these companies, the Stealth Ninja and the Sneaky Sidekick companies, are interested in function as well as usually another component or another sort of value adds. They're interested in stabilizing volumes. We've seen companies that have traditionally relied on wild harvest seaweeds be quite interested in farmed kelp because it will give them more sort of confidence in the supply chain and an ability to place an order ahead and whatnot. The local sourcing, thinking especially in terms of Alaska, thinking about brands that are able to increase the number of ingredients that they source from Alaska is huge. The impact, thinking about the social or the environmental impact to meet a lot of bigger brands have climate targets. Kelp can be really impactful for that. Function, flavor, nutrition, we talked about. Story. It's a pretty great story to tell. But of course, all these things have to happen at the right cost point. So together with all the different actors in the value chain to figure out that kit. So a call out to all the Alaskan businesses in the room, because this is the Alaska Food Policy Council. Wouldn't it be cool if we were able to really increase the number of Alaskan brands that are taking advantage of these very cool properties of kelp and incorporating it into their businesses and their products at sort of every level? So, you know, thinking about like the Spenard Roadhouse having a signature kelp cocktail or sauce on the menu that people ask for every time, or thinking about Barefoot Bakery downstairs running like a dried kelp sourdough that really has sort of like that umami kick. I saw they had the olive and rosemary, you know. And other Alaskan brands and beverage companies thinking about making it, you know, a craft cocktail or an electrolyte booster. There's so much opportunity here to really incorporate kelp in several different ways and brands that already exist, and continue to build the story, promote the industry, and as we start to open up more and more markets down the value chain. So if you are a Alaskan food brand and you're interested in sourcing kelp, we have an online directory of kelp producers, kelp buyers, and suppliers. You can sign up on this QR code with this QR code here and create a profile. It is for only active participants in the industry, so you have to be actively either buying or selling seaweed. But once you've been approved and you can create a profile and reach out directly to kelp suppliers. It also helps our market development team just know that you're out there and interested in seaweed. And we do a lot of like one-to-one matching with potential companies that are looking to source seaweed and with farmers, et cetera. So I would encourage everyone to sign up if you are interested in playing with some seaweed. Thanks. I'll take a couple of questions.
Hi, it's on. I come from kind of the R&D background, non-dairy milks, broths, things like that. Are you doing stuff to help from an educational standpoint for some of those bigger companies? Because everybody loves seaweed, but as soon as you call it carrageenan, it's the devil, right? And so like helping to keep people, like how do we talk about it in a way that people still celebrate it instead of vilify it once they like know what it is?
That's a really good point. We are starting to switch some of our messaging towards brands, and we just released a guide for first-time kelp buyers that really kind of talks about like the supply chain and the benefits of kelp and how you can talk about it to your audiences. I'm regretting that I didn't link that here, but you can find it on our website. And then the sort of switch to the collab program and thinking about specifically targeting brands. Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's definitely part of the calculation.
Hi there. You mentioned you were starting a kelp farm as well, or us in Catchmack. Is there any mentorship opportunities that you've been taking advantage of? Just because for somebody wanting to get into it, that would be a big help. Just checking out the gear and kind of doing things intelligently or working smart.
Yeah, for sure. So Missy talked a lot about the different programs that Alaska Sea Grant offers. I've been to several of her trainings and they're awesome and like a really great way to build community. So I would totally sign up for those. Greenwave also has a farmer training kind of network and community. So if you go to our website, which is greenwave.org, we've got a hub that has like courses about starting a kelp farm and running that farm, as well as an online community where you can post questions and kind of get in touch with folks. So I would say those two resources are your place to start.
Yeah, and if you get a hold of me, I can kind of help coordinate potential visits and connect you with farmers. All right, well, thanks, Lindsay. All right, next up we have Tom Thornton.
Okay. Hey everyone, my name's Tom Thornton. I'm with the University of Alaska. And this qualifies as something completely different than the previous presentations because it's not necessarily focused on Alaska, except from a comparative perspective. Keep it closer. Okay, I'm going to eat it if it's any closer. And Shingo Hamada is my colleague who's based in Osaka, Shoin Women's University, and he's online. So I don't know if we can hear him, if he wants to respond to any questions. But we got this idea that we would look at seaweed cultivation in Hokkaido, which is on the other side of the North Pacific, and operates very differently and is a much more mature industry, if you will, and doing it with an eye towards Alaska, and using we're both anthropologists, using the anthropological principle of why do you study other cultures? It's not just to learn about them, it's to get a freer view of your own culture. So maybe some of the things we're taking for granted as we develop kelp industry here, we might take a different perspective on if we look abroad. So that's partly what's behind it, but it's based on fairly limited, I would almost say opportunistic field work that is to continue, but takes funding. So that's where we're coming from. All right, so this is a busy slide, but trying to do a quick overview of the West and the East, if you will. But starting with the West, you've heard a lot about issues in Alaska, particularly with the development of kelp farming. And some of the features of it, the focus is on farming as opposed to wild cultivation. But you do have Alaska native wild harvests. You do have things like clam gardens that are traditional forms of mariculture. You also have a problem of, or have had a problem of declining yields with kelp farms due to seeds and other issues. You've had issues with transport, stabilization, but the big issue has been made clear already is markets for food products, and then lots of potential for new markets with new products, but not necessarily there yet. So it's very much a new industry and doing a lot of experimentation, and the organizations that are responsible for some of these innovations are very impressive, as we've heard. In Japan, the situation is a little different because the focus includes a significant commercial harvest of wild kelps. And again, kelps, by kelps, I mean seaweeds also. They're developing cultivation techniques, but they also have traditional ones, including the use of dynamite as a way to disrupt the bottom of the ocean and stimulate more kelp production. In a whispering tone, most of the farmers we interviewed said that doesn't work, but they still do it in some places. They have, a very large domestic food market, and much higher consumption of kelps and seaweeds than we do. So in that sense, it's a mature industry, but one that's having to adapt, particularly to climate change, which is affecting yields of wild kelp. Okay, so another complex table, but if we think about production, and some of the logos I think dropped off of here, but between Alaska and Hokkaido. So, you typically, when you develop a production system, you need some sort of resource rights and some way to manage it. And of course, the Alaska system is based on a lease for farmers. It's based on a focus on certain what are considered viable kelps for commercial production in a farm setting, and we know what those are. And then there's a management system that is really at the state level, right? So the state issues permits, regulates what you can and can't do. The cooperative situation that exists in Hokkaido was developed actually over centuries, and partially comes out of the indigenous Ainu tradition of work with seaweeds. But as Japanese migrated into those areas, it became, you would say, a multicultural, robust system that was kind of officialized as cooperatives in the middle of the 20th century. And so geographically, Hokkaido coast is divided into cooperatives, and actually the rest of Japanese fisheries are as well. And so that's important for two reasons. One, so you're not dealing with sites per se, you're dealing with regionalization of kelp, and you're also treating it as a fishery. So it's in with other fisheries, and all of them are managed or co-managed through these fishing cooperative associations called FCAs. And then within those cooperative associations, you do have household cottage industries, basically, that do a lot of their own production and even some of their own marketing and sales. And so, again, you have lots of potential commercial seaweeds, but the heavy focus is just on about a dozen or so. And some of the key ones you've probably heard of because the names transfer: kombu, which is used in soup stock, dashi, wakame, and nori, which is a porphyra, black seaweed, which is a product that we get in the U.S. Through import, but it's also one that is cultivated in Southeast Alaska by indigenous peoples. On the production side, then you've got individual farms and you've got a workforce. So there's an emphasis on workforce development. In Hokkaido, you have household firms and you have cooperatives, and and you, as I said, you have cultivation that is primarily a wild harvest still, but with some farms and other forms of cultivation. And so you also have private companies that are getting into the cultivation side of it, which takes significantly more capital. But outside of that, on the wild harvest side, it's mainly these household firms supported by the FCAs. And one of the things that the cooperatives do is they give you some infrastructure to work with. Okay, so if you need to dry, you need drying facilities, you need docking facilities, you need storage facilities. That can be provided for on a large scale by the cooperative, even places to auction off your product and so forth. And so we see relatively few co-ops in Alaska so far, but they are developing. And I know there's a lot of interest in this conference in forming cooperatives. And instead, the model is more you have industry associations, alliances, nonprofits assisting with that development, universities doing the training and so forth. Whereas in the Japanese situation, pretty much all of that would be done through the FCAs. Okay, and so if you want to join a fisheries cooperative in Hokkaido, you can't just walk in and say, hey, I'm interested in seaweed farming or whatever. You have to sort of work there and kind of demonstrate your chops for, I think, 18 months or so before you can really apply to get in. So it's a club, if you will, and a status you need to earn. But then once you have it, you know, it can be passed down from, membership can be passed down from generation to generation. But you have to live in the community to maintain that. And most households are involved in multiple fisheries. So came from a resilience session this morning, and you know, one of the important ways to be resilient is to diversify. So almost no household that we encountered was involved in simply one fishery. They're involved in multiple fisheries, and sometimes the parents have a different skill set and a different set of fisheries that they are participating in than the offspring, and sometimes there's overlap. Okay, I won't say any more about that. And then with processing, you know, you have processing companies in the Alaska context. There's fairly minimal processing that's being done, but as the industry develops, cooperatives develop, there's interest in pooling capital and buying processing equipment and so forth that would be difficult for a household industry to afford, or a household company, household firm to afford. But again, you have structure in Japan where the cooperatives are paying for the big infrastructure, and then people can utilize that. So with, for example, with drying, you know, that takes a lot of energy, as well as large facilities, potentially, depending on how much you're processing. And that's taken care of at the level of the cooperative, but they also have sunnier conditions than they do here in Kodiak. So some of it is really just laying out clean gravel that people can spread their kelp on and let it dry. But they do have other indoor drying equipment as well. So, but that can be expensive, and that's, you know, that's obviously a barrier if you don't have that cooperative that can invest. Then with vending, you know, how are our seaweeds sold out? So you have individual farms, and you have household firms that are companies. Oh, sorry, you have seafood companies like Barnacle and so forth. And then you have in the Japanese situation, you've got cooperatives again doing the auctioning and the selling and the negotiation of the price with the wholesale buyers. And these are, again, intergenerational companies that have been doing this for hundreds of years in some cases. And so they know the grades of the kelp all around the coast of Hokkaido. They know what kinds of kelp grow there. And so when you go in, you already have sort of some boundaries or some parameters on your pricing. And the co-op, because they are a big supplier, has a significant, you know, negotiation leverage, you might say, on the buyers. But they know each other also over many decades. Okay, and then you also have this phenomenon where household firms do a lot of value-added processing, and I'll show you that in just a second. but that means they can take kelp, dry it, and then weigh it, chop it, grate it, and press it and box it for sale, not only with the cooperative label, but with their own family firm label. And all that can be done in a very small space, about half the size or less of this room, and without a lot of expensive equipment. So the low capital value-added production, I think, is a really important part of the Japanese model. And then finally, you have this, on the vending side, you have this sort of concept of terroir, which we have with respect to oysters, right? Where your oyster is grown and developed gives it that certain quality, that certain identity. But the place here is by cooperative, because they're all geographically located, and by family firm, which is more a reputation for producing good value-added product. Okay, and then the buyers, of course, are manufacturers and retailers. And then in Japan, it's mainly the wholesalers with some specialists that would buy direct products from the household producers. And as I said, the cooperatives used to do almost everything, but now they've revised the Fisheries Act to allow private companies to come in and particularly help with capital investment in large projects like cultivation of seaweeds using farming techniques. And then the big difference here is in consumption and market development, as has been pointed out, and the fact that in the US, we average 34 grams of seaweed consumption per year, per individual. Do you know how much 34 grams is? Yeah, it's a tiny fraction of a kilogram. And Japan is consuming basically over a kilogram, right? So over 3 kilograms, so 100 times as much seaweed. So are you ready to uptake 100 times more seaweed as you grow up than you are now? Okay, there's your market. There's your market. Okay, so next slide. Next slide. Oh, I'm hollering, but actually I still have the control. Okay, so here's some shots of what we're talking about when we talk. So this is a household operation in 2022. Okay, and so it's really just a small room. Shingo can correct me, but I estimate it's not 12 by 15, maybe 12 by 20. So not a big room. And you've got grandma here is grading the seaweed and making sure it's cut properly for boxing. You might have the husband, her son or her daughter and husband actually pressing the kelp and packaging it. And then you've got the boxes over here that would be the final product. It's got their own label on it. So all of that value added is done just in a backyard kind of shed, but that's set up for drying. So they've got, in some cases, dehumidifier here, or they've got ways of opening vents and closing vents to make sure that the drying occurs. And I think the average drying cycle, well, it depends on the seaweed, I guess, but is about 2 years that they store it. And so when you get into larger quantities, you need more storage space. That's what the cooperatives help to provide. And then on the other side, this is an auction going on here. So you've got the buyers here, but you see the facility. It's a large facility. It's got pumped in water. It's got the doors there for big distributors to bring their trucks in, as well as the producers bring their trucks in, do all of that exchange. So that's a major facility. It's about 100 times the size of the room we just looked at. But that's what the cooperative provides in terms of infrastructure. Okay, and then here's just some shots of the commercial harvest. And so you see, this is the wild harvest. So this is people just dressed up, not necessarily even in dry suits, and just walking out into the ocean with a long pole with a hook on the end of it and pulling in the wild seaweed. And they will they will discriminate in what looks good and what doesn't look good, and they'll pull it in, and then there'll be people on the beach sorting it and then beginning to bundle it. And then they have these wonderful trucks with little hoists on the back that pick it up and then take it to spreading out to dry. And the other ways they do it are by boat. They have these long, narrow boats. And again, this would be something probably purchased at the household, the individual level, but with a low interest loan from the cooperative. And you can see the hook here that he's using. And also a flag system that's maintained by the cooperative, by the fishers themselves. And they assign somebody who essentially says it's safe to harvest now, and they put the flag up, the white flag, and then people harvest, and then they'll put a red flag up when it's time to come in. And often that's weather dependent, but it might have to do, dependent on weather conditions, but it might also have to do with the way the supply is coming in or processing limitations, things like that. And then I had to ask Shingo what this flag is for, but this is a flag that a boat might put out there to say, essentially, I'm not a poacher. I'm a member of this cooperative and have the right to be collecting kelp here. Okay, yeah, this is the last one of pictures. So here's the drying facility. Okay, that's very low tech, just pebble in a flat spot, but it takes labor, obviously, to stretch it out and then to collect it. And then the cutting, grading, preliminary grading, and packaging. And there's one of those trucks I was talking about. And then in terms of how things are branded, this is just a quick example, but this is about 8 miles of coastline around Eremo community, and all of these are different types of seaweed and grades of seaweed that grow along the coast. And so this is something that buyers and obviously sellers are aware of. And that plays into how it's priced and how the seaweed is sold. The other things that obviously species matters, the production method, the ecology, whether it's deep or shallow, the age of the seaweed, the season when it's collected, the harvest method, whether it's hooked or beach harvested, as we saw, the drying method, and the form. And obviously the location. So all of that plays into the final pricing and the identity of the seaweed, the branding of the seaweed. So it's very much place-based. Okay, and then obviously the products selection is exquisite in Japan. So you have high-end specialty shops, whether they're restaurants or gift shops or whatever, that sell all kinds of high-value products with seaweed that you tend not to see in our markets, though they do have it at Costco, right? Okay, I think I'll stop there. I was going to say a little bit more about cooperatives, but we can ask questions about that.
We could probably do one question. I have a quick one. How are the cooperatives funded?
Yeah, I don't know if I know all of the ways that they're funded, but some of it is government funding, and I think it's maybe Shingo can answer more specifically if he has the ability to speak through. But I think it's something like block grants, that they get, but they also obviously earn money through their own production and sales. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Next up, we have Lexa Meyer. We're going to go from our global perspective down to some local research.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning. Yes, I'm Lexa Meyer. I wear many hats. I am also part of the Kodiak Archipelago Leadership AMA liaison through the Kodiak Archipelago Leadership Institute, or CALI for short. And so journey of some of the research projects, not all, because there's quite a few that through the Build Back Better program, but those that are focused mainly in Kodiak, and then some of the funding has come from the University of Fairbanks and other funders. So this is really kind of a mix of things. Just to give you an idea of what Cali does, Cali is a local community advocacy group. They started with the idea that we would put together what's called the Rural Forum. We meet twice a year, bringing folks in rural and indigenous communities throughout the Kodiak Archipelago, and we talk about community issues. And of course, a big one is food security and sovereignty. So Cali set up a number of years ago the Luchik Grown program, which now has soil and hydroponics farming in most of our communities archipelago, providing stable food security and fantastic produce throughout the year. So of course, it's a natural transition for Cali to transition into the world of marine farming. And it was now 4 or 5 years ago now. We were invited, my husband and I, through Alaska Ocean Farms to give a talk, and the community response was tremendous. People were very excited about mariculture. So since then, we've been working with the Alaska Sea Grant program and providing training for folks all over the state, but a lot of focused training here in the archipelago to educate community members and help them with permitting, help them with getting farms set up, all these fantastic things. So a big shout out to Cali for their role in putting all of this together. And again, liaison, I won't read this here because we're a little short on time today, but you can learn more about it through the Alaska Mariculture Cluster website. And there's so much to learn about kelp mariculture in general and oyster mariculture. And I want to give a big shout out to the folks who for 30 to 40 years in this state have been working to develop an oyster industry. We've talked a lot about kelp today, but oysters are a really important mariculture product from Alaska. They have been for a long time, and they deserve a lot of credit for the work they've been doing. So we have had a lot of kind of Cali-sponsored research projects here, and some of these others have been sponsored through again, other programs, and then other funders like the University of Alaska. So here's a big one that we started this last year, and it's we're almost have the final report out, but we mentioned drying as a primary way to stabilize kelps and seaweeds. Well, very little is known about the particular species that we are starting to grow here. Our sugar kelp is markedly different from the Saccharina latissima you'll find on the East Coast. And so it has kind of different properties that may lend it to drying differently or going through a different drying process altogether. Of course, we have bull kelp, we have dragon kelp, we have other species that are endemic to this coast that no one's really dried before. So we just thought we'd set out to dry a few of these species, run them through a mill and practice grinding them into a powder. A lot of food manufacturers here in the United States were like, we don't want just whole blades of kelp, give us something we can add to a food product. So we went through the process of milling that kelp as well. And it was very interesting. We also did chemical analysis of the kelp. We did some microbiological safety testing to make sure that it didn't contain things like fecal coliforms or salmonella and things like that via our drying process. And so all those results will be made available here shortly. And the good news is everything's microbially pure, but unfortunately, kelp is really good at sequestering heavy metals. And heavy metals are found naturally in background levels in seawater all over the world. No one knows exactly why kelp does this, but it can make a little bit of a problem for food producers especially. So all these results will be out. And again, this is a way to just kind of inform the general industry at large of the challenges and the successes around drying kelp. Then we have another project here, and this was funded through Southeast Conference, again, the Build Back Better funding from the Economic Development Administration that Jason Lessard spoke to earlier. And this is a fantastic project. We're looking at growing two species that have never really been cultivated before, and that is this Hedophilium nigripes, or the split kelp, and then dragon kelp, which is this kelp here that can grow up to 30 feet long in a single season. It's a kind of a cousin to the ribbon kelp with the Elaria marginata, really a cool kelp. And so we've got these species out on lines. We're very excited to see how they grow this year. And we're just trying to grow them at different depths and see how they grow. We chose these species for cultivation because, my goodness, they cultivate like crazy on the non-seeded portions of kelp farms here in the archipelago. So we figured if they are naturally recruiting, they'd probably be good candidates for cultivation. And we also engaged not only farms here locally around town, but we have a farm that is part of a community farm for the community of Uzinki. And we actually have Duke Delgado in the room who's working on this project with us. So he has 2 arrays out there, and we're going to see through the spring how they grow. And then we also have a spin-off project for this where a company is going to take the kelp and look at the chemical composites and constituency of these different species, which have never really been studied before, and see how those could fit into food products and or nutraceutical production. And that work will take place at the Kodiak Seafood and Marine Science Center and will be housed there. And so thank you so much to the Alaska Sea Grant Program for making that happen. And this is a fun one. This is more funding through the Build Back Better program. This is involving a indigenously owned farm that's just out here outside of Trident Basin here around Kodiak. And this is looking at what happens between the nursery and the farm. So we took bull kelp seed that was grown in the lab, expose it to different temperatures and different light regimes, and we're seeing if that has any impact on the growth in the nursery. So looking at optimized nursery conditions, and then how does that translate to growth on the farm? So maybe it grows really well in the nursery, but the farm production suffers because of accelerated growth or something. So this is in progress right now. We did the seed this fall, and now we have the bull kelp outgrowing on farm arrays here just outside of town. So a very exciting project. And again, looking at performance enhancement in both the nursery and in the ocean. This is a fun one. This is the spinoff to the Other Species Project, a company out of California called Marine Biologics, partnering with Alaska Ocean Farms, which is my farm business, Spruce Island Farms over at Uzinki, and then Alaska Sea Greens, which is over on the west side of Kodiak Island. They're quite a remote farm over in Uganic Bay. And so we're all growing these alternate species, and then they'll see what's in them and how they can be applied industrially. So a very cool project. And what's nice is that a lot of these, at least two of the species we're growing, are really only found on this coast. You can't find them other places. So that allows Alaska to have a little bit of a market advantage, as we were talking about in several other presentations. What can you do to set yourself apart in a market just loaded with seaweed globally, right? Well, we have that opportunity here in Alaska. So this Other Species Project is really going to add to that body of knowledge and hopefully give us a little bit of a market edge if we can start cultivating them regularly. And then this is a fun one. This one just wrapped up this last summer. This was a partnership with Greenwave. So Lindsay Olsen was here working on this project with us. Alaska Ocean Farms, Alaska Sea Grant, again, housed this project. This is a picture here in their pilot plan of this equipment stage. And this is processing kelp in a way that would stabilize it so that you could ship it out. You wouldn't have to worry about it decomposing, and then it can be further refined into other products. And specifically, this company called Macro Oceans is looking at making high-end extracts for the health and beauty market, and specifically cosmetics and, different facial treatments. And globally, the cosmetics industry is worth like $49 billion a year in the United States alone. So if we could get Alaskan kelp into 1% to 2% of that, I think we're doing pretty well. So this was a very exciting project, and we stabilized quite a bit of kelp. And what's nice is this setup is really simple. You could put it in a shipping container. You don't need a lot of space for it. It only encompassed like maybe 25 square feet of processing space. So it's something you can do in a community, even way off the road system somewhere, stabilize your kelp and ship it out later for processing and further refinement. So really an interesting project. And there's results published on this again here at the Alaska Mariculture Cluster here, the Joint Innovation Projects. You can get on that website and you can look at all the different projects statewide. And as results come in, they're listed there. And then another fun one, this is a big project, and this is outside of the Build Back Better funding. This was funding through the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trust. And this is looking at the ecological impacts of kelp farming and oyster farming. We just really don't know our impacts on the marine environment. And as we develop a new industry, we have the opportunity to address some of these issues as they come up, and they hopefully will come up through some of this research. There could be good things that happen. There could be bad things that happen. To get ahead of these challenges, work towards more of the good effects of farming versus the deleterious effects of farming, and hopefully those in real time. Oftentimes, like with commercial fisheries, it's after the fact or after a problem's been happening for a number of years. We have the ability to do that in real time right now. So we are doing so many things, looking at water chemistry inside and outside of farms, and then all sorts of fun things, even the growth of oysters, the colonizers on the farm, both on the farm structure, but also on the benthic ecosystem, so on the seafloor. that look like and how does that change as mariculture starts taking place in an area? How does it compare to areas immediately outside the farms? So it's really a massive project, and we've got so many partners. We've got NOAA, the Prince William Sound Science Center, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Alaska Sea Grant, and all this is being administered through AFDF, or the Alaska Fisheries Development Foundation. So we've got a lot of amazing partners. And then as a side project, there's a lot of interest in growing oysters in the Kodiak Archipelago, but we have rumors that PSP is always really high. So we've been able to take some of these test oysters we have on an array, and we've been able to run them through some PSP testing monthly. And we've demonstrated that so far, so good. Our oysters are healthy and relatively free of saxitoxins, at least well below regulatory levels. And then we did a fun one this last year where we looked at how to space bull kelp out on a farm line, employing some methodology utilized in Asia for cultivation of some species, where we spliced little sections of seed line in, and then we looked at the growth of those sections of seed line. And well, we came up with clusters of little plants. That's what we did. And we were trying to find a way to grow bull kelp that looks more like the wild type. But unfortunately, in cultivated setting, you have a lot of these little tiny baby kelps per unit area, and you get clusters of smaller plants, not singular large plants. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and said maybe mechanical thinning, something else might work. But honestly, the bigger markets that emerge for bull kelp are all about biomass. So you can grow a lot of little plants. It's just about growing a lot of stuff, not so much about growing a particular phenotype. But Barnacle Foods, they were really excited about something like this. They've been looking for a long time to buy farmed kelp, but the farm kelp doesn't meet the spec. Obviously, this is just a tiny little bulb and a tiny little stipe. They're looking for those big wild type bull kelps and for their kelp pickle products. So we didn't quite meet their spec, but we did rule out that this methodology would not work. So sometimes in science, it's really important to know what doesn't work as much as what does work. And then Callie has been sponsoring continued farm monitoring. We know so little about the marine environment. A lot of our farm sites are chosen statewide because of convenience, not necessarily because of ecological or biological fitness for growing kelp. So we went ahead and we've started just doing some basic analysis, water sampling, just looking at the nitrogen profiles, how those change over the growing season. That could help us determine when is a better time to start harvesting. Remember, we can't keep fertilizing, so if nitrogen levels drop and our kelp stops growing, that's probably a good time to get it out of the water. So we've been looking at things like that, and just simple things like water temperature can matter too. In the summer, we see biofouling start to increase. That's the little creatures that like to live on kelp, and that can be a problem, obviously, for markets. And then we've just had a whole bunch of other activity in that space. Again, training, permitting assistance, continued mariculture planning at the Rural Forum twice a year, and just feedback on issues. And so through the Build Back Better program and the AMA Liaison program, Callie's been able to send information from the archipelago back and residents about challenges and issues we've encountered in the mariculture space. And with that, I'll turn it over to a few questions. Thank you. Not one question. It must have been a really good presentation then. If you have questions, from now until 3 o'clock, I'll be downstairs at a table giving away samples of kelp popcorn. So please stop on by and we can chat more about any of these issues, anything about kelp farming or oyster farming at all. So thank you. Ah, there. Yeah. So we did see that. We did see that it varied amongst species. The only two heavy metals of concern are cadmium and arsenic. So other levels were very, very low, not of immediate concern, but those were the two that were of concern, and they did vary. They were over kind of regulatory levels that you'd like to see in a product. And you have to remember this is dried, so it's a 10 times accumulation of that compared to fresh kelp. So where you wouldn't have concerns with these heavy metals in fresh kelp, once you dry it and concentrate those metals in that dried product, then you're kind of bumping up over recommended daily allowances of these different heavy metals if you're consuming a gram or more. Only will, yes.